Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today we're going to be breaking down the Chicago Bears from a fantasy football perspective. The first thing we're going to obviously look at is the quarterback. They brought in Nick Foles this year, which was huge because that's either going to do one of two things. A, they're going to have a better quarterback because I actually believe Nick Foles is a better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky. Or B, Mitchell Trubisky is going to win the job from Nick Foles and therefore show that he has improved since last year. From the Chicago Bears perspective, you got to think, because there's a big debate on who they would actually want to win the job. Mitch Trubisky is obviously younger. He's got more talent from an arm perspective. He's faster. And they drafted him number one, so it would also make them look less dumb for passing on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson if Mitchell Trubisky were to actually come back and win the job and show improvement and be that franchise quarterback. That being said, I think they want Nick Foles to take the job. And the reason for that is, and I'm talking as if both of them are equal. They show up and they're both the same. There's nothing separating the two. I still think they want Nick Foles to take the job because of the contract situation. Salary-wise, Nick Foles is already locked in for 3 years at a reasonable backup salary rate. And as we know in the NFL, it's a lot easier to build around a quarterback if their salaries are low and they're not taking a huge chunk of the salary cap. And then now you're having to put lesser players around them. So Nick Foles is already locked in at a good salary cap. They got a great defense on hand. We're going to talk about the rest of the players on the offense here in a second. But I think that from a team perspective, they want Nick Foles to win that job this year, right? Because then they know what they're working with for the next 2 years. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not suggesting that anybody draft Nick Foles on their fantasy football team, but it's important to know who the quarterback's going to be so that we know how he affects all the other people that we will be drafting, like David Montgomery, like Allen Robinson, like Jimmy Graham, right? The other positional group that's really important for this is the offensive line, and last year the offensive line was terrible. So what did they do this year to change it? Well, they brought in a guard from Seattle to replace Kyle Long, who retired. They're a long-time Pro Bowler. And really, that was it. The big change that the Bears are hoping for is that Juan Castillo can actually make a difference in that offensive line, and that Bill Lazor can add to that running game that they currently wasn't doing much last year as it was, right? What Nick Foles will do, however, is he's going to be more consistent on the offensive end. So, like I said, I believe it's going to be Nick Foles, so I'm going to rate these guys like Nick Foles is the quarterback. And being more efficient offensively is going to really help the defense. I don't actually think that Nick Foles is going to come out there and sling the ball all over the place and just outperform Mitch Trubisky's passing yard stats, or what we would expect Mitch Trubisky to put out there from a passing stat standpoint. But I think from an efficiency standpoint, it's going to be much improved, and it's going to look a little different. The receivers, for instance, like Allen Robinson, I don't expect him to get a big boost just because Nick Foles is probably a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. Because if we read between the lines of what the Bears have done this offseason is essentially they've loaded up at the tight end position. They brought in Jimmy Graham at a starter caliber price. They brought in Demetrius Harris from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to be a blocking tight end. He's not going to be somebody on the fantasy radar, but he's there, so we can read between the lines of what they're planning on doing. And then their first pick of the draft, which was in the second round, but it was still their first pick, was used on the first rookie tight end off the board, Cole Kmet. So I think they're going to try to move to a more 12 personnel type system, which means one running back, two tight ends. If you think back to Matt Nagy's history, he has a history with Andy Reid. Andy Reid runs a lot of two tight end sets, but I think they're going to run even more two tight end sets more frequently than they do in Kansas City, closer to something like Philadelphia. They let Taylor Gabriel go this offseason and replace them with Teddy Ginn, but I don't think Teddy Ginn's coming in to be the Taylor Gabriel replacement. I think that's going to be Anthony Miller, and they're going to start running two tight end sets, two receivers, as opposed to any three receiver sets. So when Ted Ginn comes on the field, he will be the third guy, him or Daryl Mooney, who basically brings the same attributes that Ted Ginn does. He's just going to be really fast, he's going to stretch the field, and he's going to open things up for other players. But I don't think either Ted Ginn or Daryl Mooney are going to be any kind of fantasy asset. I think Anthony Miller might get a boost this year just because he wasn't on the field that much and he was dealing with Taylor Gabriel when he was healthy for targets. He was fighting with Taylor Gabriel for targets. I think Anthony Miller is basically going to be the easy, clean-cut number two this whole season. Allen Robinson, I don't actually see him excelling past what he was last year. I'm not dropping him down in my rankings or anything if Nick Foles gets the job. But I do think that Jimmy Graham's going to eat into a lot of that because Nick Foles likes to feed Jimmy Graham. I think there's a chance that Tariq Cohen can be more involved in the pass game, similar to what he was in 2018 or somewhere in between 2018 and 2019, because Nick Foles does like to feed it to the running backs as well. The biggest winner this year, from my perspective, is going to be David Montgomery, because David Montgomery, if you remember back to last year, we just look at all the things that went wrong throughout the season. The offensive line was terrible, which nobody was expecting it to be that bad because in 2017, 2018, it wasn't actually that bad of an offensive line. Mitchell Trubisky was awful, which people were expecting him to improve. And really, there was a lot of underlying stats that shows that David Montgomery's kind of a beast. He broke a lot of tackles last year. According to Sports Trader, he was the number 5 running back in breaking tackle efficiency. This is not just an underlying stat that, he had one good year where he broke a lot of tackles, but was he really that good at it? Well, if you go back to college, 2017, 2018, he led the league both seasons in forced missed tackles according to Pro Football Focus, right? So I think he's just going to have a monster year this year. They brought in, again, the offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor, who is there to make the running game better. And they brought in Juan Castillo to help out the offensive line. And they're moving to that 12 personnel style of running. So you're going to have more big guys blocking on the offensive line. And Nick Foles is just a little bit better at getting the ball to his running back. Last year, he was also behind Tariq Cohen to begin the year, and then he didn't really take over till the end of the year. Now, I'm not saying Tariq Cohen's going away. I still like Tariq Cohen this year as a change of pace back. I think Tariq Cohen, outside of PPR leagues, is going to be he's going to be better as a football player than he is as a fantasy asset, because I really think they're going to want to get David Montgomery and really bring that play great defense and run the football mentality to this team. And David Montgomery is a good pass catcher. He just happens to be on a team with Tariq Cohen. And that's not even taking into account there's a chance that Cohen gets hurt. So, again, I think David Montgomery is primed for a big year. He's probably my biggest sleeper of the year up to this point. I'm sure I'm going to do more videos just based on my belief of how good David Montgomery is going to be. And I'll have a couple more of those underlying stats that you can just see just by putting on the tape of David Montgomery. And then the next biggest winner is obviously going to be the defense. As I talked about earlier, if Nick Foles is efficient this year, then the defense is going to have an easy time returning to that 2008 form of defense, and the schedule this year is pretty light, both from a running back perspective of David Montgomery, a receiver perspective of Allen Robinson, and a defensive perspective. I just think that the Bears could actually be back they're going to be closer to the 2018 Bears than they are the 2019 Bears. That's it for today's show. I deeply appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you have any comments, concerns, or questions about anything I said, please put them in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe to the videos. Till next time, see ya!